Hi, I'm Alessia, and you're about to watch a message that was preached at Calvary Fellowship in Miramar, Florida. At Calvary, we exist to help you take your next step with God. If you'd like to learn more about Calvary, make sure to download our mobile app on the App Store or Google Play Store by searching up My Calvary.
All right, how's everybody doing? Hey, we are glad that you're here. And so this is going back a while. This is 1995, so it's a while. But I was driving from Florida to Illinois with my band. We were playing at this festival for about 25,000 people. It's a huge show for us. I drove with the band from Miami to Tallahassee, where they dropped me off to pick up my wife, then my girlfriend at the time. So this is about a year before we got engaged. And so I picked her up and actually drove with her and her sister and a friend of ours all together. It's about a 20-hour drive. And so we couldn't stop because we had to get straight to this festival on time. So we all took turns driving. I got the wheel about 1 a.m. Right before we hit, to kind of give you an idea, right before we hit like St. Louis. Now, I've only feared for my life twice. I've been to a lot of places. I've been to the Middle East. I've been to South Central LA. Both times I've feared for my life. Both times St. Louis. It's a frightening place. Anyway, so we drive through there. We're getting in the last leg. It's about 7 o'clock in the morning. We're maybe an hour away from Bushnell, Illinois, which I know you've never heard of, because even the people who live in Bushnell have never heard of Bushnell, Illinois. It's just cornfields, and then this little area where they do this big festival every year. So by 7 a.m., I'm half asleep. In fact, I stop at the stop sign. It's kind of the end of the road. You got to make a left or right. I need to make a left. But I stop at the stop sign, and I just put my head back, and I didn't realize I'd fallen asleep at the stop sign. And then, because the car we were driving was a stick, I actually because I fell asleep, I took my foot off the clutch, and then I just started floating. I started driving in the middle of the street. My buddy wakes me up. He's in the front seat. He's like, "Bob, you got to wake up." And I open my eyes. I look to the left, and there is a tractor trailer headed towards us, ready to send us to heaven early. I put that thing, in gear and get moving, and I do what everybody does when they're tired. What do you do when you get tired and you're driving? You lean forward, because apparently that's supposed to do something. I don't know what that does, but you're like, no, I'm going to lean forward because that'll make it better. So anyway, we're like now 20, 30 minutes away. We're driving through the town to get to the place where we're staying. And as we're driving through, I'm so tired. I'm doing about 80 miles an hour, because that's what you do when you're tired. Drive faster. That's the wise thing. And so my wife says to me, she says, "Bob, maybe you should slow down." And I say, "Carrie, what is there, like one cop in this whole town? And what are the chances that he's going to see me and stop me?" Now, you're going to have to, if you don't believe me, you're going to have to find my wife and ask her if this is true. But no sooner did I say the words, "What is there, one cop in this town, and you think he's going to find me and stop me?" And it's like, right as I said that, I see a light. Woo, woo! And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And then I pull over, and I'm trying to talk to the cop. "Officer, I'm half asleep." "You're what?" "Forget I said that." It's so weird. And all, right? Because we've all had those moments where we want to turn back the clock. And you know what we want to do? Turn back the clock. I'd love to go back in time and tell myself this thing, right? And we've all had those moments where, I want to go back in time, and you want to tell yourself, you don't date him. You don't want to date him. You don't know. This is going to go very poorly. You're literally going to live a lifetime movie if you do this. And yet, you want to do that, or you want to tell yourself, you don't want to eat that much birthday cake, because it isn't even your birthday. It's not even anybody's birthday. You just bought a birthday cake, right? That never happened to me, just a guy I know. And so, but listen, this is the thing, is that everybody has that, and we've been talking about that if you've been with us, but everybody has moments that we regret. And the big problem is, it's not just that we made the bad choice. It's that there was someone there who loved us and cared for us enough to tell us the right thing to do. And we just didn't take it, because it's just like all we had to do was ask and listen, and things would have been different. And that's what separates the wise from the foolish. So we started this series a few weeks ago called Hindsight, and the reason we called it that is because we all have this thing that we've said, and that is, if I knew then what I know now, things would be different. And what wisdom does is it has the ability to take the understanding of hindsight and put it on the front end of situations and circumstances so that we experience better choices and a better outcome. And so to get the wisdom that we're talking about, we've been looking at this collection of sayings that are found in the Hebrew Scriptures that are called the book of Proverbs. And Proverbs was written by King Solomon, who was the third king of Israel. And if you kind of give you an idea, there was King David, who was, if you know David and Goliath, if you're not familiar with the Bible, that David. And then he had a son named Solomon. And Solomon was known, it was said to be the wisest man in the world at that time. Some have said that he's the wisest man ever. And one of the things we've been saying every week is that Jesus commented, and if you read the life of Jesus in the Gospels, you read that Jesus commented on the wisdom of Solomon. And once again, if Jesus calls you wise, that's something to put in your Yelp review, right? That's just a good thing. And so now, just to kind of give you an idea as to how wise Solomon was, I want you to see what life was like for Solomon. This is in 1 Kings, is the story of all the kings of Israel, and it's in the Hebrew Scriptures. You can read that. At the first 11 chapters or so are dedicated to Solomon. But look at what it says in 1 Kings chapter 4. It says, "And God gave Solomon wisdom and exceedingly great understanding and largeness of heart like the sand on the seashore. Thus Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the men in the East and all the wisdom of Egypt, for he was wiser than all men. And men of all nations, from all the kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom, came to hear the wisdom of Solomon." I mean, isn't that amazing that people, every kingdom, every king, queen, prince, or governor, they would all stand in line with literally gifts that they would give Solomon to say, "I have a question and I want you to answer it." That's how wise he was. If that's how wise he was, but this is the thing that is amazing to me. Does a guy that wise need to listen to anybody else if he has that kind of wisdom? And yet when Solomon was kind of establishing his cabinet, this is at the beginning of 1 Kings 4. Look at what it says. "So King Solomon ruled over all Israel, and these were his officials." And it lists all of them, but here's the one that I found interesting. "Zabud, the son of Nathan, a priest and advisor to the king." You see, Solomon had people all around the world traveling just to hear him talk. That's how wise he was. And yet Solomon, the wisest man on earth, has more to say about getting wise counsel than any other ancient writer of antiquity or any other biblical writer. You see, Solomon recognized that there have to be people who speak wisdom into your life. Because if you don't know what to do and you seek wise counsel, you don't even have to be wise. All you have to do is be wise enough to ask the right person to get, and you implement that answer, and you will be counted among the wise. That's why in Proverbs chapter 19, Solomon says this. He says, "Listen to counsel and receive instruction that you may be wise in your latter days." Listen, that listening to wise people, that getting understanding is the mark of wisdom. Now, nobody's arguing that, right? We're all in church. We're all thinking rationally. And there's nobody here that's like, "Yeah, wisdom from other people, that's for dummies," right? Nobody's thinking that. Everybody's like, "Yeah, getting advice, that's good." But you see, here's the problem. It's not in these moments that we need counsel the most. When we're, thinking rationally about situations, and that's not the thing that we're dealing with. We all recognize that getting wise counsel is important. But see, the real question is, from whom do I get wise counsel, and when do I need it? And so what I want to do is, and I put this in your notes because, I recognize as much as I invest in these outlines, I know that you don't 3-hole punch them and keep them in a binder in your house. I know you don't. I sometimes like to imagine that you do, and that you review them every once in a while and just be like, "Wow, Pastor Bob, he's really got a lot of good stuff." But I know you don't. I know that they'll find their way, like somewhere under the seat of your car. There's like 20 of these. Some of you were even kind enough to give them back to me in the offering box. Like, I already know all the fill-ins, so you don't have to give them back to me. But so here's my point. This is what I want you to do, because right now you may not need this, but you probably need to take a picture of this page once you fill it out. Because there's going to come a point in time when someone wants to give you counsel. And I have this little matrix. There's 3 things that I do. And this is when you're going to be like, hey, there's that thing Pastor Bob talked about. Let me pull up that picture. And this is what's going to be helpful to you, is should I listen to this person? Here are the 3 things that you need to look at. This is, if anybody I'm going to listen to, they've got to kind of meet these 3 criteria. Here's number 1. They love God. As a Christian, I want someone who shares the same worldview that I have and wants me to honor God in my decisions. Number 2, they don't just love God, they love you. That is, that they care for me, want the best for me, and they have they're emotionally vested in our relationship. And then the third thing is, because that's not enough, the third thing is that they are where you want to be. So that is when you think about the area in which you're asking for advice, they have a level of success that you're able to point to and say, wow, if things go for me like it's gone for them, this is good. And that, once again, you don't want to take advice from people who have not done well in the area that you're, right? This is why you don't ask advice. You don't get financial advice from broke people. You don't take relationship advice from people that can't get along with anyone. That's not what you do. Solomon would say it this way in Proverbs 24. He says, "For by wise counsel you will wage your own war, and in a multitude of counselors there's safety." Solomon recognizes that the best way to get counsel is to say, hey, have you fought your own war and been victorious? Then give me some advice, because I want to be victorious in my own war, and that's why there's going to be safety, or literally in Hebrew, there would be deliverance, because only a fool thinks that they don't have any blind spots, that they see everything with perfect clarity. This is why we need wise people in our lives. So once again, nobody's arguing with that. You see, the real issue isn't, do I need wise counsel? The real issue is, who do I listen to, and when do I listen to them? And what I want to spend our time focusing on the most is the moments that we listen to them. Because here's the thing that I've recognized about wise counsel, that we need wise counsel. The moments that we need it the most are the moments that we want it the least. And that is the thing that is important for us. And this is what separates the wise and the foolish. And I'm going to tell you something, that if you will grab hold of this idea, it literally is a game changer. And I'm not talking about someday in the future. No, I'm talking about this afternoon, life becomes different when you decide that I'm not just going to get wise counsel when I want it, but I want to get wise counsel when I need it most. It's usually when I want it the least. And so what are the moments that we need it the most but want it the least? Because I really believe in identifying those moments. We can be ready and more apt to hear it. So here's the first one if you're a note taker. And that is that good counsel helps me see beyond emotion. Beyond emotion. That is moments when emotion has kind of clouded my judgment, because that happens to all of us. Solomon would say it this way in Proverbs chapter 16, that better a patient person than a warrior, one with self-control than one who takes a city. And this is the challenge that we have with decisions in general, is that the most important decisions that we make are never neutral when it comes to emotion. They're always emotionally charged. But when they aren't, you ever noticed this? That you always know exactly what to do with other people's kids? Your friends' kids, you know exactly, if they were my kids, let me tell you what I would do. And especially if you don't have any kids, you know exactly what to do with when I have kids, let me tell you something, it's not going to be any shenanigans, right? And then you know what happens? You have kids. And you're like, well, and now you're talking like your grandma. And why? Because somehow emotions got involved and you can't figure out what to do. But when there was no emotion involved, it was very clear what to do. Now, let me just tell you this, right? I don't do any marriage counseling anymore at Calvary. I did marriage counseling for the first 10 years of our church. And here's what I learned, is that there is not one couple that I have ever counseled that has stayed in our church in 10 years. That's how good I am. is that I can meet with someone even just one time, and they'd be like, wow, I never want to see you again, ever, not even on the street. And so, and it's true, sadly. And so I'm batting 1,000 in that area. And so now when someone says, Pastor, would you be willing to meet with my wife and I? That's what you say. What I hear is, Pastor Bob, we're looking for a reason to leave Calvary, and we're hoping you'd help us find one. That's what I hear. And so, because let me tell you what happens. And this is the same thing is true for you when your friends call you and be like, oh man, I'm having problems, right? Like, I only need like 10 minutes to figure out what your deal is. And that's the same thing. You only need like 10 minutes to figure out what your friend's problems are. And be like, and because I'll say something like, yeah, you know that thing you do? Stop doing that. That's what's causing all your problems. Stop doing it and things will go better. But you know what the issue is? Like, that's so easy for me to diagnose in someone else's marriage. Well, what about your own? Oh, there I have all kinds of problems. I'm like, well, but you got to understand what I'm dealing with, and it's like, and by the way, I've been married for 22 years, right, to this amazing woman. 95% of my marriage problems, you're actually looking at them right now. That's 95% of the problems. And so here's what happens is because, once emotion gets involved, we just have a tough time seeing clearly. And that's why we need wise counsel. Not when we're seeing clearly and, I'm totally, it's when the emotions start clouding us. I'll tell you what happened. A couple weeks ago, my wife wasn't feeling well. And so I was like doing some bunch of chores around the house, and I was cooking every night. And so this is 2 Sundays ago. I got done from church. And then kind of the way it works for us is that, we're here all day. And so I get home probably like 3:30 when time's all said and done, and then we kind of start making some food. So it's kind of like brunch is what happens between breakfast and lunch. We call it dinner. It's what happens between lunch and dinner. And so I made dinner for everyone, and we sat down to eat. And then Carrie said, she's like, Bob, what are you going to eat? And I realized that I had made food for everyone except for myself. And yet I'm like, you know what? I'm more tired than I am hungry. Just forget it. I'll just hang out, but I'm not going to make something else. So anyway, everybody ate. I hung out, and then everything got done, and I cleaned up after lunch, dinner, and then Carrie went and laid down, and my kids went to go do whatever it is the kids do, and I'm thinking about a whole bunch of things, and I'm just sitting at the dining room table, and then I realized, like, wow, I really am hungry. And so I went into my pantry, but I'm like, I'm not cooking one more thing. I know that you've had those moments in your life. I'm like, I'm not cooking one more thing. And I'll like eat an onion like an apple, but I'm not going to cook one more thing. And so anyway, but I go into my pantry to try to find something to eat. And I see this box of double stuffed Oreos. And not only double stuffed Oreos, because I can resist double stuffed Oreos, but golden double stuffed Oreos is another thing entirely. I don't know if you know this, but the Bible says that heaven, the streets are paved with gold, then double stuffed Oreos. So anyway, it's biblical. And so I hadn't had an Oreo cookie in so long. I had a golden double stuffed Oreo cookie. Okay, fine, I had 12. Stop judging me, all right? So anyway, so I eat, and listen, by the way, I just got to say, they were fantastic. They really were. I mean, like, carbs or something, So anyway, I get done with, the reason I only ate 12, because I was planning on more, is that after I ate the 12th one is when the stomach ache started hitting in, and because my system's not really used to Oreos anymore. And not only that, then I started feeling so guilty that I had eaten the Oreos, because I know it's going to take me more than a week to undo the damage of the 20-minute Oreo venture. So then I have to go into my bedroom where my wife is, because like I've been married 22 years. We have no secrets about anything. And so I'm like, hey, listen, I got to confess something to you. I did something terrible. And she thinks like, was this like manslaughter? And I'm like, no, worse. I had some Oreos, and she's like, all right, I'm getting up. So she walks out to the kitchen, and she's like, what happened? I'm like, so I had an Oreo. And she's like, and she's looking at me like, you had an Oreo? I'm like, fine, I had 12. I thought this was a safe place to talk about my problems. And so anyway, she goes into the pantry, and she throws the box of Oreos in the garbage. And you know what's funny? Like, that's the right decision. I was so outraged. And I'm like, the nerve. And then I'm coming up with all my excuses. Do you know how many starving children could have been fed with those, like Mia, Xander, Livy. There's 3 right there that could have been fed with all this, right? And here's the problem is that this is what happens, right? This is just what happens. And and you say, that's so silly. It is. But this is just what happens when we get emotionally clouded. Is that we become incapable of making the right choice, because what wise counsel does, and we have to be open to receive it, is that they can tell us what the right thing to do even when our emotions are running at the highest. I mean, I'm telling you, it's true in relationships, and you're dating someone, and all of your friends have been telling you all the issues. I don't know if this is right, I don't know if he's right, I don't know if she's right, and then you make a decision, something happens, and you say, you know what, it's over. And then you have the debrief after. What happened? It wasn't that your friends were seeing something that you never saw. You saw it, but because you were emotionally invested, you were like, yeah, you were just making excuses, and yeah, but that's not a big deal, or yeah, but you don't see it the way I see it. Listen, once you got emotionally disengaged, it became easy to deal with. This is true financially. Listen, you know this happens in your world, right? You know why you go to the Apple store and they let you handle all the merchandise? You know, in most places they have it all behind glass, right? But now you go to Publix and you can't buy $10 worth of razors without a manager unlocking a glass case. They're giving you a $1,000 iPhone. Here, when you want to hold it, do I? And now here you are, and now, oh, it does this, and then, oh, look at that. Wow, it feels lighter, feels different. And then, hey, could you take a picture of me taking a picture with this new phone? It's like picture in picture. It's like an inception moment. And so now, and I don't know how it works, but this is typically how it works in marriage. And that is, if you are a spender by nature, you are married to a complete tightwad. That's just how God has ordered the universe, all right? Or like if you are a saver, you've married someone that, when they hear the more you spend, the more you save. Like, no, we're saving money. Don't you realize? If we don't, anyway, and so that's just the way it works. So I go to the Apple store and I'm like, wow, this feels so different. And my wife's like, it's the same one. And I'm like, it just feels different in my hand. It's the same size as the one you have in your back pocket. Yours still works. You have one at home. You don't need one. I'm fine. You're judging me. I'm just saying, this does make me happy. And this is, and you're taking your kids through Target, and you know what happens is that everything that they want is at eye level. Boy, isn't that interesting? And then they get the thing, and you know what you're saying to them? You already have one at home. You don't need one. You don't even play with the one you have. And it's like, and you think, it's like, because if you're 5 or 45 or whatever 5 you are, you never outgrow it. Because once you become emotionally attached to something, it becomes so difficult to see reality. And this is what, and I want to tell you something, that wisdom, what God is not trying to do in your life is have you become some kind of robot and eliminate emotion. What God is recognizing is this is the human condition. We get attached emotionally to people. We get attached emotionally to things. We get attached emotionally to circumstances. And here's what God is saying. God is saying, because this is the case, sometimes when we're attached emotionally, it's hard for us to see what the right thing to do is. And in those moments, what we need is a wise person to come alongside who loves God, who loves us, who is successful in the thing that they do, to tell us, hey, this isn't the right thing. And all you have to do is be open, and you'll be able to navigate even the most emotionally cloudy situations that you deal with. That's one. Here's another one, and this one's even more challenging, and that is that good counsel helps me confront pride. It helps me confront pride. Now, before what is pride? Pride, this is my definition of pride. Pride is making more of yourself by making light of everyone else. Here's what pride says. Pride kind of has this idea that I'm the only one that sees reality. I'm the only one that sees things as they really are. I'm the only one that has the level of knowledge, experience to really understand how this is going. Everybody else is crazy. I'm the only one that's seeing reality. Here's what Solomon would say. He would say this. He would say, by pride comes nothing but strife, but with the well-advised is wisdom. You see, strife is a relational problem. And Solomon is saying that, listen, through pride, you're going to have nothing but relational problems. But if you will get real wisdom in your life, that's where good things will happen. Well, being well advised, that's where wisdom comes. Because pride, here's the challenge, and this is how you know that you're suffering from it, because it's very easy to detect in others, very difficult to detect in yourself. What pride does is, if you can't let down the image of having it all together, you're probably suffering from pride. If you can't say, I don't know, you just kind of try to let people think that you do know all the time, then you're probably suffering from pride. Now, this is why, guys, we do this. This is why, and guys, we tend to suffer from this maybe a little bit more. This is why we don't ask for directions. And I'm not just talking about driving. This is why we don't involve ourselves in directions of any kind, because it would assume that we don't know what we're doing. So I have this little grill that I use sometimes. I call it the hot dog grill at my house because that's pretty much all I cook on it. But it broke, so I had to buy like this cheap little grill that when I'm not like using my smoker, I use this little grill. So I bought one and I had to build it. So I built it in the living room because that seemed like the right place. And I'm just start building it because I know what a grill looks like. So I don't need all of the directions. I'm so good at building this stuff that when I'm done, there are even extra parts I didn't need. That's how good I am. And so my wife is like, Bob, are you sure that this is how it's supposed to look? And I'm like, of course. And she's like, because the way, it's kind of like leaning forward, and that when you turn it on, it's like the fire would be coming right at you. And I also feel like the hot dogs would just roll right off. And I'm like, well, that's why you have to angle them. And so now I'm like, and then I realize she's right. And then when she left, I rebuilt the whole thing. But this is I'm telling you, this is the challenge, and it is a struggle. The joke that my wife and I have is this story that happened years ago. It was before we had kids. We went to Boston for Thanksgiving, and we went to visit some friends of ours who were living in Boston. I don't know if you know, there's like 1 million colleges in Boston, but they had moved to Boston for a couple years to get a PhD. And so they were staying south of Boston in an area called the South Shore, which is where I grew up. I grew up in the South Shore. And so we were staying in the North Shore, which is where my sister lives, which is just a little bit north of the city of Boston. And so I'm like, oh, we're going to the South Shore. So we get in our rental car and I drive, and I get on this kind of road off the beaten path. And now you got to understand that this is before like Google Maps and Waze, is before electricity and a lot of things. But what we had was, and if you're old enough, you remember that when the GPS came out, that like Garmin had this big GPS that you'd suction it. It was like this giant thing the size of your shoe that would tell you where to go, you know, and so it was like this big GPS thing. And so my wife was like, hey, do you want me to plug it into the GPS? And I was so indignant. And I'm like, woman, let me tell you something. I grew up in this town. You see these streets? They raised me. I was born and raised on these streets. Anyway, so I'm going on and on about how I know this town and not, anyway, and it's just like, what's coursing through my veins, baked beans. Anyway, so I'm going through this whole thing, right? And then, this is no joke, and you can ask my wife this is just about 20 minutes later, we're driving, and she's like, I don't think we're going the right way. I mean, I don't know, I just feel like maybe my sense of direction is off. Anyway, 20 minutes later, I see this big sign, welcome to New Hampshire. And I'm like, hey, why don't you see this newfangled technology is working? We'll try that, I guess. I'm taking the scenic route. I guess you don't want to see a bunch of trees. And New Hampshire, where the trees outnumber the people 50-1. And so, now, if there was that there's actually a list of the things that God hates most. Now, I know it's kind of a weird topic because I think that people, especially if you're not a Christian, you'd be like, well, based on what I've seen about Christians, I think I know the list of the things that God hates. The problem is that the things that Christians get up in arms about don't even make the list of the things that God hates most. So, and actually it was Solomon that wrote the list. So I think you'll like this, and this kind of gets to our point. Look what he says. This is in Proverbs. He says, these 6 things the Lord hates. Yes, 7 are an abomination to him. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. Listen, you know what tops the list? Pride. Because pride kills everything that it touches. This idea that I'm the only one that sees reality for how it is. I can't listen to you because you don't understand it. You're beneath me in some way. You know, Solomon says this in Proverbs 12, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but he who heeds counsel is wise. This is why proud people can't hear counsel, because they think everyone's beneath them. And listen, that is a terrible place to live. Every time we reject counsel because it didn't come from us, it's pride. And we will never make better choices or get farther in life until we accept that we aren't the source of all knowledge. And you will never grow. We'll never grow in our career, marriage, relationship with God until we allow ourselves this gift, the gift of not knowing, of just being able to say, I don't know. And then we're able to receive another gift, the gift of wisdom. All right, last one, and then we're done. So it's when I'm feeling proud, I don't want to let go of my image. That's when we need counsel the most. When I'm emotional, that's when we need counsel the most. But here's the third one, and that is that good counsel helps me when I disagree. It helps me when I disagree. You know, it's easy to listen to counsel when they are disagreeing with what I already want to do. It's very difficult when it is the opposite of what I want to do. Here's what Solomon says in Proverbs 12. He says, whoever loves instruction loves knowledge, but he who hates correction is stupid. I remember reading this to a guy once, and he's like, did you just call me stupid? I'm like, oh no, the Bible just did though. And so totally different. And here's the thing. I need people to speak into my life when I'm about to do something really dumb. When I'm about to do something right, I'm already headed in that direction. Listen, the hardest time to listen to counsel is when someone disagrees with what I'm going to do. And I want to tell you something, this is not in your notes, just jot this down somewhere. But if you are a person who consistently refuses to listen, one of 2 things or both of these things are going to happen to you. Number 1, your friends will stop telling you the truth. And number 2, you won't have very many friends. Because here's what true friends do. They say what needs to be said even when it hurts. They don't say it in a hurtful way, or they certainly don't seek to say it in a hurtful way. But honesty is what builds friendship. And the deeper the friendship, the deeper the truth that can be spoken. Listen, the secret to wisdom in your marriage, the secret to wisdom with your friends, the secret to wisdom with your kids is to be able to admit that you're wrong before the decision is made. It's not hard to admit that you're wrong when everything in your life is on fire. But when you're having, listen, and if you're married, you know this. And if you've had disagreements with your friends, you know this. And if you've had issues with your kids, you know this. That you're having some kind of argument, disagreement, discussion, and you're digging your heels in. And yet part of you knows that they're right. But you just don't want to let go because I don't want them to be right. Listen, that is such a dangerous place to live. That hating correction leads to all kinds of pain in your life. And that's why wisdom requires a quality. And here's what it is, to be teachable. It requires teachability. Someone in your life loves you enough and knows enough to see something you can't see. That is a gift to you. And our responsibility is to let them in and be teachable. Not to think that we're the exception to the rule, or if they knew my circumstance, or I know what the Bible says, but you got to understand that my situation is different. No. that there are people in your life that want to come alongside you and speak wisdom in your life to make your life better. But you know, there's even better news than that. There's a place where ultimate wisdom can be found. Paul, in the New Testament, a guy who was radically converted. He was the guy that hated Christians, imprisoned Christians, had this radical experience with Jesus, and then became this advocate for Christianity, planted a whole bunch of churches, and wrote the documents that became half the New Testament. Here's what he says. He says this. He says, I want them to be encouraged and knit together by strong ties of love. I want them to have complete confidence that they understand God's mysterious plan, which is Christ himself. In him lie all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. You see, here's what the best news is. The best news is that when you and I walk with God, when we have a relationship with God and we follow Jesus, Jesus can lead us, direct us, correct us, speak to us, and give us life-altering wisdom. But here's what that means, that we've got to know him, that we've got to surrender. We've got to drop the pride, the image that says that we've got it all together, because we don't. A lot of times we create the facade to try to hide the fact that we're all broken people, all of us, all of us. Listen, Jesus died for you. He died for you and he rose again from the dead. That's what our faith is built on. That event, the resurrection. And you know what that means? That we can experience through that death, through that resurrection, that we can experience love, grace, forgiveness, and wisdom. That we don't have to keep making the same mistakes. That we can come to know Jesus and experience a life that isn't alone. That he can walk through us through all the seasons of life and take us further than we could ever go by ourselves. Here's what it takes. It takes the wisest decision you'll ever make in your life. The decision to open your heart, the decision to ask God to forgive you, the decision to do the thing that Jesus asked every single person that he encountered. He said this, follow me. That's what it takes, is following him. Let's pray together. And Lord, we want to thank you. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for not leaving us alone to figure it out, but instead you want to do a work in us. Help us. Help us to be wise. Thank you for the people you've brought into our lives. And God, sometimes we haven't been appreciative of what they've shared with us. Help us to appreciate even the things that we don't want to hear when it's right. So God, may we leave this place wiser than we came in, surrounded by people who are wiser than we are in certain areas. Do that work, we pray, in Jesus' name. And everybody said, amen.
Thanks for watching this week's message. Make sure to click the subscribe button below to stay up to date with all the things happening here at Calvary. God bless you.